Hi, I'm Cathy Buyarski, and I serve as Executive Associate Dean in University College at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, our IUPUI. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about how we took proactive, intrusive outreach techniques, combined it with coaching to develop an advising model that we have some evidence that shows really great promise for impact on student success. So I'm sharing my screen, and let's get started. So we really tried to use a phased approach to this, and that helped us do two things. One, with each progressive addition to the program and the strategy, we were able to make sure we had things in place. We weren't kind of changing too many things at once, and then we wouldn't know what part kind of broke or what part worked. The second thing is that it really helped our staff with the transition. At one point, we had been a generalist model, walk-in only center. So going to this very targeted and intrusive approach was a big change for our staff. And we felt like they would really adapt best, develop the skills at the level they needed to if we did a phased approach. So you can see here that in 2014, we developed what we call the cluster model. You probably call it meta majors. So we looked at common career paths, academic programs, we counted students, we divided our staff up, and we developed what we call, again, the cluster model. 2 years later, we decided to assign advisors within those clusters. In the first variation, a student just needed to identify with a cluster and they could see any advisor in that cluster. 2 years later, we went to assigned advisors. So advisors had a caseload and students had a name that they would connect with. Of course, if that advisor wasn't available, a student could meet with anyone else in the cluster, but they had a name of someone that would be their guide through their college experience. In 2017, we started working with a company called Inside Track. Inside Track provides coaching to students, and we were working on a project where we were providing coaching to low-income students, and we had the opportunity to train some additional people. So a number of our academic advisors were trained as coaches, and they started to play around with with learning the peer coaching model and having a load of students that they coach, as well as trying to see how coaching fit within academic advising with what we traditionally provided for students. In spring 2018, we started using EAB to do really targeted specific outreach and campaigns to students to try to increase our contact with the student and in person with the student, to use those outreach campaigns to get them to come in and see us. And then finally in 2019, we started to bring it all together, where we put together strategically what we were doing with caseload management and outreach and proactive advising campaigns with what we were learning about coaching to come up with this new model that we have and that I'm going to tell you about more in detail. So first, let me tell you a little bit about our caseload and meta majors. So we have 6 meta majors, 6 clusters. What's unique about our clusters is first, that they're based on career pathways, not based on academic majors and the way our academic schools are organized. So for example, in our School of Public and Environmental Affairs, we have programs that are management oriented, policy oriented, nonprofit human services oriented. Each of those majors, while they're in one academic school, are in different clusters because we knew our students, if they're likely to change their major, it's going to be within a career area, not necessarily within that academic school. The second thing that's unique about our clusters is that in addition to, of course, academic advisors, we have a career consultant embedded in each cluster. The career consultant does a couple of things. One, they're an in-house referral for advisors who are meeting with students who need more career information on their academic interests. As the student can go right to the career consultant. The career consultant then also provides training and informational updates to advisors on careers related to the academic programs in which they're advising, so that we can start to integrate advising and career conversations with students. Within each cluster, we decided that they could develop their own strategic outreach programs and interventions. Because of course, we have some programs, for example, our Health and Life Sciences programs and a cluster, where programs are very competitive and they all require an admission. The kind of support and outreach that was needed there was going to be different for students who, say, are in our Arts, Humanities, and Human Services cluster, where most programs are not application-based, and students can move fairly easily between programs and not lose credit. So we wanted each cluster to also be able to address the specific needs of students in that cluster. For all of our clusters, we wanted to make sure that our efforts were really reaching the students who needed the intervention the most. And I'll talk a little bit about how we did that and how we determined who those students were. And we also knew that in order to make this model work, we had to really use technology. We didn't want our advisors to be sitting in front of their computers, developing campaigns and typing emails and doing all the administrative stuff that has to happen behind the scenes in order to do proactive outreach campaigns. So we developed common messages that a cluster could tweak. We developed a calendar of communications, and all of that is handled centrally for us so that students, or the advisors can really then focus on seeing students instead of administering all of the technology and the strategic intervention that needs to happen behind the scenes. In terms of coaching, I told you we started with Inside Track Coaching that has a wonderful coaching model that really is kind of coaching at its best and purest form. We did know that going into this and trying to put it into advising, that wasn't going to be possible using that pure form. And the advisors who had been trained as coaches and had been kind of testing this all out developed what we call the Inside Track Plus model, which adapted that pure coaching model to the advising setting, including not just what students talk to advisors about, but the time constraints that advisors face because of their heavy loads. We trained all of our, before fall 2019, we trained all of our academic advisors and our career consultants in that Inside Track Plus coaching model. So everyone was on board, not just those few we had trained earlier in our process. And we really decided that we wanted to move from a model where the only students who were required to see an advisor one time a semester were first semester students, students on probation, and students who had been reinstated. We wanted all students to have more meetings with our advisors, and we really were shooting for 2 to 3 meetings each semester for every student. So let's talk a little bit about how we decided who we could impact. At IUPUI, we know that high school grade point average is the biggest predictor of success at our institution. So that predictor is so powerful that it holds through even into the second year, the sophomore year. So it works for continuing students too. So that's what we used. And you can see on this slide that we really found that the sweet spot was students' grade point averages who came in with high school grade point averages between 2.85 and 2.49, or I'm sorry, 3.49. You can see that they're the largest group, and that they have a retention of about 55%. Not very good. We want to get that up. But when we get to that 3.5 level, it really jumps much higher to 70%. Similarly, when we look at the below 2.84, those students that are at a less than 50% chance of succeeding at IUPUI. And we actually have very few of those students. So we really wanted to focus on that middle where we knew we could have the most impact. And the second part of the slide, you can see that the same thing held true when we ran the data on our continuing students. And again, we really wanted to focus on those students in the meaningful middle. That is not to say that we don't meet with everyone and don't welcome everyone, but our primary efforts were going to go towards those students in the meaningful middle. So this slide shows our overall model. So if you start with the dark green shape in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that first-year students in the meaningful middle are our primary target. They're 14% of our advising caseload, and we want those students to meet 3 times with each advisor. First-year students who are not in the meaningful middle, that lower end, that with a small number of students, most of whom have other supports behind besides their advisor, as well as that 3.5 and above, those 2 ends, we wanted them to have 2 meetings with an advisor each semester. For first-year students on probation, they also would have 2 meetings per semester with an advisor. And I know that seems a little counterintuitive, but you have to keep in mind that those students also have a mentor that they're required to meet with. So they have an additional intervention besides their academic advisor. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see our plan for continuing students. So continuing students in the meaningful middle, we want them to have 2 meetings a semester with their advisor. For students who are not in the meaningful middle, now typically this is going to be students who are on that high end, because if they were on the low end, they were more likely to be dismissed by the time they reached their sophomore year, that we weren't going to require them to come in. They are welcome, we will embrace them, but they're not going to be required. And then again, we have the 2 times a semester for students who are on probation, along with the mentoring. In the very bottom of the right-hand corner of the slide, you see that this equates to about 400 appointments per semester per full-time advisor. That's a lot of student contact. And we worked with the advisors, we worked with calendaring to make sure that we could accommodate that before we went in. We also knew that if we were going to have that many contacts, those contacts needed to be really purposeful and really meaningful. And that was why we moved to the coaching model. So this is what Inside Track calls their coaching wheel. The wheel you see has been adopted for our use. This is the Inside Track Plus model. Basically, this wheel reminds the advisor to check in with students on all of these different areas. Because as you all know, a lot of times students will come in saying that they need one thing or have a question about one thing, and when you start to unravel it all, really there's something very different that's at the bottom of their story and their situation. So this wheel helps get that all out up front. The other thing it does is it helps students understand that we're here to help them holistically, that we're going to talk with them about wherever they feel they have the most need. So when we bring these 2 things together, this proactive advising and this coaching, you can see the plan that we have. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see we have kind of 3 buckets of topics for those meetings with students. Meeting 1 is a Start Strong meeting. Meeting 2 is a college planning meeting, talking about where they're at with their major and starting to get them ready to register for the spring semester. And meeting 3 is a Finish Strong meeting. Let's make sure that you really wrap up this semester well. We have similar kind of buckets of topics for all of the students. There's also a note here at the bottom that on the left-hand side, that box, our advisors are also involved in first-year seminars, providing information about academic planning. There are assignments that they help the instructors implement in their courses. So a lot of the stuff that advisors typically do about choosing courses, scheduling courses, we've partnered with our first-year seminars to take that off, to decrease the amount of time that happens in advising sessions to maximize the amount of time that is available for deeper coaching conversations. The advisors developed an even deeper kind of structure to this coaching approach that we have. So you could, as I said, the first meeting is a Start Strong meeting. This chart shows you there's the goal for the overview of what should happen during that session. The required topics that an advisor needs to cover and some suggested questions for how to cover those topics, potential other topics that fit within the theme of that meeting, and then the outcomes we want for students. So we have this guide to really help advisors make the most of a short amount of time to ensure that those conversations are really, really meaningful for both the student and the advisor. For continuing students, this slide just shows that we have a very similar model. We've mapped out what should happen in those two contacts with students, so advisors have a guide to follow to, again, make sure those conversations are truly meaningful. When we look at we're 1 year into this, and we have some promising results. So you can see that for the meaningful middle students, the first year meaningful middle, again, remember that was our primary target. They have between a 2.85 high school GPA and a 3.49. Students who came in, did not come in at all, did not respond to any of our contacts, only 34.2 of those students persisted. Now, this probably has a lot to do with either students engaging in similar behaviors of not attending class, not turning in assignments, or having tremendous challenges in their life that make it really difficult for them to engage with us. Students who had one appointment hit that 52.6 mark. 2 appointments went up to 58, but here's the magic number. When the students who actually followed through to for those 3 appointments, 73.5% persisted, and that's just a little bit above our all campus retention rate for fall 2019 students. So that tells us that we were on the mark. When we had 3 as our goal, that's the target that we want to continue to hit. When we look at first-year students who are on those ends that are not in the meaningful middle, we see a very similar pattern with 0 appointments, 1 appointment, and 2 appointments. That was the target. We get to 72.3%. Now, interestingly, with the students who are not in the meaningful middle, when we went to 3 or more appointments for those students, 72, but it only went up 0.6%. So when we're talking about allocating our time and really strategically and proactively reaching out to students, we know that for students who are not in the meaningful middle, our efforts really, we're not going to stop a student from coming in, of course, but really that 2 is where we want to hit. Those 2 appointments is where we know we can have impact. So we're very excited about these results and the feedback it's given us on the program that we've developed. So the main thing I want you to take away from this session, the main thing that we've learned is that proactive advising, that intrusive outreach, targeting specific populations, we all know, we've been to 1 million conference sessions on how that is really important and helps increase student success. We know coaching is emerging as a promising practice for student success. And when you pair those 2 together, you've really got something special going on. So increased contacts, plus really high quality contacts and conversations is what leads to student success. On this last slide, you have my contact information, both my email and my phone number. I hope that you'll reach out so I can share more information, answer questions, and help talk with you about how you might look at this model for your institution. Thanks so much.